All right, Dale, thanks for joining me on the podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we did some messaging back and forth trying to find a time, and we finally did it here.
Here we are. We did it.
Yeah,
Organization.
yeah, it's great. I'm excited to talk to you because I had come across your Instagram account, Hockey Head Swap, a while ago. I don't even remember how I came across it. It's like this is pretty cool. And we'll get there, but let's
Sure.
start. At the beginning. How did you come across this great game of hockey?
Um, I mean, it's something that probably showed up in early childhood. Like probably some of my earliest memories are getting like street hockey gear at Christmas. Get like a blocker and catcher from my parents, and then the leg pads from my grandparents, and then
Hmm.
burn those out over the year and get new ones the next year. Um, and just always playing in the street, in the backyard, on the school rink or whatever. So that was probably, I mean, for as long as I can remember, kind of being obsessed with hockey, and especially when I was younger with goalies, collecting the cards and whatnot. And I didn't really play a lot of organized hockey as a kid. I think these days, you talk about access to hockey and some of the barriers that are in place. So I didn't really play a ton of organized hockey, but lots and lots in the streets and on the local rinks and stuff.
Yeah,
So that,
you speak of access. Where'd you grow up playing your schoolyard
yeah,
hockey? I guess we'll call it.
born and raised in Saskatchewan, so
Okay.
doing it there, and it's hard to say. I'd have to go and ask my parents what the options were at the time, but they supported it in the ways that they could. But I don't think I played in an organized league until I was, well, probably in grade 8, and even that was like a pretty ragtag roller hockey league.
Yeah.
And then once I was old enough to finance my own way, and as an adult, I played in lots of different kind of capacities. But probably like most of my goaltending time was spent as a kid, and then mostly backup roles once I was playing in some more organized situations.
Yeah, you talk about the access part to the game, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger glaring issue in the game, I think, is not just the access to teams because of the ice costs and the association fees and everything else. In fact, my wife and I, we live in Minnesota, where hockey's like Canada, and half the kids in our neighborhood play. And so they sell these calendars every year. And it's nothing more than computer paper stapled together, but it's I forget, like $20 a calendar, and it puts you into a raffle to win stuff. We always make our money back.
Yeah,
But we're looking at how many calendars each kid's required to sell on top of what they have to pay for the year. And so we just started kind of looking into the association's meeting notes and everything. And then we come across the little line about how much money they just have in savings that they're not even using. It's like that could fund the entire association for 1 year.
hmm,
Why do they have that much money in the reserves? It's like more and more of these associations, it feels like they're almost going to they're operating as a nonprofit, but, but with profit mentality, and just trying to make it harder and harder for that kid that just wants to play. And everything's got to be a travel situation. You have to be on the road every weekend. Bring back house rec hockey across the
yeah.
board, and you're going to have more kids playing, and they're just going to love the game.
Yeah,
I
we've
think.
got we've got a few initiatives. I know in our community here, outdoor hockey league and stuff like that. Removing some of those barriers where the outdoor
Mhm.
rinks and organizing it there, and then some equipment rentals. I think as a kid, I don't know if those existed then. So I think there are some steps to remove some of those barriers in some places. But yeah, I mean, it was uh, I got my hours in, but they weren't in nice shiny rinks.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you talk to a lot of players that did come up the traditional way. Like I was lucky enough to play association hockey and high school hockey and whatnot, but I still loved going out on those, park district rinks, skating outside, and even USA Hockey. I'll say that's where the skill comes from. It's the unstructured hockey is where the good players are developed. So why not have more of it?
Yeah, I mean, I like that you say that because all of my hockey was unstructured, so I'll lean into that. When I was
Yeah.
looking at the bio and you're like goaltenders of all skill levels, I was like, well, we'll push that. We'll push that. So,
Yeah,
um,
and I mean, how many of us, especially, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but we look to be, in the same generation, I'll at least put. But how many of us would come home from school, play street hockey, whether it was on rollerblades or foot, and usually it was a mix of the two with everybody on the street,
depends on the
and
season.
yeah, and it was just like, all right, we're just all we're trying to get enough bodies to have a game and have fun.
Yeah,
And if somebody got hurt, it's like, God, it was almost like in the Sandlot where it's like, oh no, now we're down a guy. What are we gonna do? And
for
then
sure.
the old Wayne's World when the car comes, game off, game on.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing I look at is like I was always keen on it. I was always really into it. So you just find ways to play and the opportunities and you know that's kind of the goal.
Yeah, I have to laugh. In the comment section, one of my high school teammates said we need to go back to full ice for mites, make them skate the full length of the ice. But I appreciate the fact that you didn't play the traditional come up through play for the association because I think that's lost sometimes on a lot of people, especially when we get to the beer leagues, is that we expect everybody to have the same journey. And not all of us did play association hockey for different reasons. But, to your point, as you got older, you're like, well, now I have the ability to play. Um, what made you want to, play as an adult and not like a lot of other sports where people are like, those days are behind me.
Yeah, I mean, I had a few different opportunities with just some like weird ragtag kind of leagues. A lot the roller hockey leagues in Saskatchewan. I don't know what even the opportunity is now, but I remember playing. Um, it would have been like grade 7 or 8, and there was an old roller rink just outside of town, Cookies roller rink, and like one side like the boards were the radiators, the other side you just tip some benches over, and that's the surface. And I mean there were teams, and we played, and um, I don't know where I was going with that, but like I mean that was that was
Typical goalie.
one of my early ones, and we sort of switched out in roles there, so I got plenty of out time and plenty of time in the net as well. Um, and I'll say like most of my skill set is out of the net. So these days, besides the old bones, I don't back up nearly as much as I used to, and anybody who plays with me will attest to that. But then yeah, later on, playing one of my earliest jobs out of high school was at a sporting goods store, and reconnected with some people I knew in high school and got onto their roller hockey team, and we just kind of alternated there. And then yeah, figuring out, I don't know, it's just a way to keep playing, keep involved, and that competitiveness. Even if you didn't grow up playing in some of those like highly structured leagues, you want to go out there and you want to play well and you want to improve yourself, right? So finding ways to play in settings where there's some competition was important.
When I think that's what's great about hockey too is it's one of the few sports where once that competitive window is closed, we still play as adults. I mean, you see it a little bit in rec league basketball. Baseball players have it the softball route, but they kind of peter out pretty quickly after that. But hockey, we seem to just play until the body gives out on us. There was the famous story of Mr. Surdich up in Duluth, Minnesota. He kept playing until the week he died, and I think he was like 95 years old when he passed away in the last 2 years. We keep playing. I've skated with guys that were in their 60s and 70s that had hip and knee replacements. They're like, no, as long as I can move, I'm going to be out here. I think that's the great thing about hockey. To your point, we kind of feed that competitive need, but at the same time, it's about the competition, but it's not. It's more about the gathering than it is the competition, I think.
Yeah, and having the opportunity to play on some teams where it's supportive, where you watch some teams play and the teams just eat themselves with with their attitudes and things like that. So playing with people who want the same things you want. We want to win games, but we're also there to have a good time and hang out after and stuff. So you get winning, all of that community aspect.
Winning makes everything better, but it
doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt.
Our season opening game this year, we didn't do too well. And I'm at the bench between second and third period. We were down by quite a bit, and I'm looking at the guys, and I said, "How's everybody doing?" They're like, "Oh, geez, I'm dead tired." Most of them didn't skate all summer. I said, "Well, nobody's had a heart attack yet, so as long as we keep that up, we've won the game." And just kind of lighten the mood. It was like, yeah, we're just out here to get some exercise, have fun, and not die.
As long as everybody can play next week, we're mission accomplished.
Yeah, exactly. So, as you mentioned, when you were younger, we were getting the street hockey goalie equipment as a kid. What made you want to stand in front of the ball or the puck, whatever you guys were using out there? And,
there's a couple of things I thinking back on that. One is just you never have to take a shift off, right? Like you don't ever have to go to the bench. So you get to play the whole game. There's no other job like it on the ice or on the street or wherever, right? So I think there's that element, and then I'll be honest, and this is where some of what we're doing with the account comes in. Is the equipment is just cool. It's just the coolest thing. And there aren't a lot of sports where you get to show that individualism and that artistic side or whatever on while you're playing, right?
Right.
So that's something that just doesn't exist anywhere else that I can think of offhand.
I forget who the Toronto Maple Leaf catcher was that came out with the goalie mask style catcher. And at that time, it's like, this is cool. Catchers are going to be able to express themselves. And right away, MLB came out with rules, putting the kibosh on that. It's like, they don't even have anything just team-centric, yet alone individualistic on their masks. It's just boring, solid colors. Like, how cool would it be for a baseball catcher to go crazy with their mask? Yadier Molina. He could have had some cool, as much as I hate the Cardinals, could have had some cool ones over the years with them.
For sure.
It's really the only position in sports where the athlete gets to really let their personality shine, or depending on the goalie, are they Trevor Kidd and let their freak flag fly?
And growing up in the era I did, there was no social media. There weren't any ways for people to kind of express that individuality or to build those brands or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so they're kind of the only people whose personalities you had some insight into. We didn't have cable, so the only games I got to see were the Hockey Night in Canada ones on Saturdays. So your access to outside of staring at hockey cards was not a lot. So it's a unique aspect to it.
It really is, and I still remember the first time I saw Corey Hirsch's Vancouver mask with the haunted house and everything. It's right there, you knew his personality. Even though he's a goalie, he was a little bit off to put that on his mask. You got insight into it. So, you mentioned the hockey cards. I think most kids growing up in the 90s, cards were cool. And what got you into collecting hockey cards and kind of get that going?
It's just a kid obsessed with hockey and wanting to access all parts of it. I really enjoyed drawing as a kid, and so drawing the masks, drawing the players, and all that stuff. It's a reference picture you have as well. And then everybody collected them, so you were trading and trying to find your favorite players and stuff like that. So just a natural progression of my interests as a kid. And I didn't know that would turn into something super weird later on, but here we are.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned drawing them, because I remember the Fleer Ultra sets. They had so many great pictures on their cards, front and back, that I would always grab those sets specifically to find the goalies, because they seem to always have a good picture of the goalie's helmet. And they usually had about 4 pictures on each card. There was at least one that was always good to, look at that goalie mask and try and draw it. And if I saw some of those drawings, one, I would think they were terrible now, but I just thought they were so cool back then. Who was the Capitals goalie? He had this great American battle flag mask. It was Rick Tabarachi. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I always messed it up. But he had this cool one. I was always drawing that mask. And of course, Eddie Belfour's Eagle Man. I was always drawing that one. Yeah. So now we fast forward, and you've got this awesome Instagram account, Hockey Card Head Swap. Where did you get this idea to, mess around with the different pictures? And
yeah, so I mean, so to be clear, I'm about to get all the lore potentially completely wrong, because it kind of comes from some different places, so I apologize to anyone who was involved in this process for the lies I'm about to spread. But this is how we can start the Wikipedia page, I suppose. It started in an office place, just like many others, and someone had brought in like a box of hockey cards. I can't remember the exact reason they were in the office, but it was just like this, whatever size box of hockey cards. And I think it was Donnie, and I'll give credit to Donnie because he'd want the credit. He said, as a kid, we used to cut the heads off of one card and put them on another, and we were like, that's weird, but cool. And then like a couple ended up getting made out of novelty, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, this fun conversation in the office, and we got some packs of Pro Set. What is the Pro Set? Oh, I should remember. It was Pro Set. I think it was Pro Set cards. Just a bunch of like old Pro Set cards that hadn't been opened, and so a couple people in the office were like, well, let's have a little competition. Who can make the best one? So we all had unopened packs, took them back to our desks, opened the packs, and put some together and compared them. And of course, none of us were objective. So we turned to the rest of the office to vote on it. And they voted, and they cast their votes. And who's to say who won the first week? Who could remember? It might have been me. And then we just did that, I don't know, 50, 100 more times. And that sort of happened. So eventually we kind of took it to like an online group. And so anyone in the office could go and vote on them. And it kind of turned into a thing that was, we were pretty excited about. Weekly competitions called Face Off Fridays. And then after that happened for a little bit, I was like, this is a visual medium. I'll make an Instagram account, and we can all just follow it, and just as a way of documenting it, kind of in case they get lost or the heads fall off or something like that. And so started it, and started slowly picking up just like random hockey card accounts, people who were collecting and things like that. And before you know it, there was more than just the people in the office who were kind of tagging along. So that was kind of the start of it.
So you're talking about the office. Do you work in a office? What kind of office is this? You guys are having pretty cool
this much fun?
inter-office competitions.
Yeah, we were a community-based organization, and we were off the clock. You'd come in a little early and hang out in a person's office or something like that. Lunch times, things like that. You'd drop in, and, hey, how's the card going? People not wanting to show their hand, stuff like that. But it was an office where, everybody had, I can't speak to it now. I don't work there anymore, but just like lots of good relationship and lots of friends I still see today. So that was I want to say, I should have looked it up, but that was probably 5-7 years ago. That all started. Is that right? I don't even know.
For the most part, the first chunk of the Instagram account, it's just that. It's the hockey card, mostly hockey card head swap. You've got a few, where you got baseball players, I like the Tommy Lasorda with the hockey player head and stuff like that. But then for whatever reason, in April of last year, you designed a blocker, screensaver of Marty Brodeurs and just dropped it on there. Like, why? At some point, you're like, you know what? I want to create a lock screen for a smartphone that looks just like the real thing. First of all, they're incredible, but where did this idea come from?
So the head swaps, when we were all in the office together, good way to keep the momentum going, and it did. I would say that a couple of people took turns organizing it and making sure everybody got their submissions in and on time for the vote was probably more work than it should have been some weeks. And then people move into different roles, different jobs, and so we all remembered it fondly, but it kind of slowed down. But we had this huge catalog of cards. So I was like, I'll just kind of post them intermittently and whatever. And then, the momentum slowed. And then obviously we've got March 2020 and everyone's got a little bit more free time, potentially, depending on your situation. And I'd had this idea probably for a little while of creating these blocker wallpapers, because I mean, it's rectangles, they're rectangles, just it made sense. This is where the story gets a little tangled, because I have to go back to probably 2001 when I get the PC version of NHL 2000 for my birthday or Christmas or something. And with the PC version, you have the option of adding what we call like mods today, right? So you can like import graphics and things like that. At the time, they were called add-ons. And one of the first things, after you play it for a little while and you're a little disappointed that all the brands of the pads are like St. Louis, it's just the names of the teams. So you do a quick Google and you realize there's a whole community creating these things. Just because they wanted the game to look awesome. And so, you join a community and you kind of lurk and you hang out, and then you try your hand at creating some of those things. And over time you build that skill. And so, probably from, I would say around 2000, 2001 to, I don't know, maybe 2005, 2006, was creating different mods, and I was focused on goalies. There were people who focused on jerseys and stadium updates and stuff, and I just focused on the goalie equipment. And you get kind of good at it. And so there's this whole history there with these communities, DMD, Double Minded Downloads, TBN. There's a couple more, just name dropping for some people who might check it out later. And so, you kind of hone that skill, and you've got this idea that you can create this equipment digitally, right?
Right.
And then, they stopped producing the PC game. They got the licensing finally for lots of the brands for the EA Sports franchise. And so that necessity goes away. But in the back of your mind is this idea that, the right opportunity comes along. And you just got nothing else to do. You got a little bit of time. So you sit down and you give it a try. And that's interesting. I couldn't remember when I first posted it, but I remember starting it in January, and it took a few iterations to get everything kind of where I wanted it to be, because I think it's one of those things I didn't want to rush and put something out there that didn't really look great. I wanted it to feel authentic. I wanted to get the technical details really, really well done. Because I remember when we were making these add-ons for the early games, the closer it was to perfect, there's cred, right? There's that that prestige within the community. So you're always, looking for those fine details, looking for those things. So I wanted to be right. And it took some prototypes, some different beta testing. And I'll thank Cole for testing and giving me feedback on just hundreds of blockers over these last little while.
I have to ask, what's your graphic design background? Because you're not just somebody that, took graphic design in high school. I can't imagine. There's got to be some proficiency there.
I'm trying to remember if I think that there was an option at the time, but it was pretty. It wasn't super in depth. Mostly just like my parents had like some strange like home edition of Photoshop that was mostly for just like grandparents to take red eye out or something. But it had the option for layers and things like that, which is really you need to be able to do in order to kind of accomplish what we're talking about today. And mostly it was just it's just too many hours is what it is, just practicing. I did end up eventually working for a sign company and ended up doing graphic design for them for a while. But I will say, like, I honed it wanting to put the gear in the game. That was probably where a lot of my hours went in. A lot of time was spent.
That's
more
awesome.
than I would want to calculate. But that 10,000 hours thing, yeah.
Because when I look through, and I'm doing it right now, look through the Instagram account. I mean, first of all, you started with some of the best iconic blockers of my childhood, from Marty Brodeur. I think I'm almost to the bottom. Then the next Patrick Waz, Blue Coho. Eddie Belfour's Vaughn with the eagle on it. Cujo. I loved the Chris Osgood, the V Vaughn. In fact, I had that blocker in black and white. So you started out with some of the great 90s era blockers.
Yeah. Well, that was not an accident. That wasn't an accident. I was like, okay, we got to pick some heavy hitters. And you wanted to have some mass appeal, I suppose. And so I just went to the all-time wins list, and at the time Fleury wasn't in it. So like if you take a look at that, that's I think the top 3 in all-time wins. And then I decided I was just going to do one for every team. So I wasn't going to repeat a team until I'd gone through the entire league. And so that was kind of the impetus there. And it was interesting because early on people would be like, oh, do this one. And I'm like, I did that team. But mental note, we'll come back to it. We'll get back there. So there's, I probably made 40 or 50 before I posted the first one. Because I was like, I don't want to make one and people be like, this is amazing. And then maybe you're like, I don't have anything else. And I also, as you make them, you find new and better ways to get the effect. And so I think you look at some of the first ones. I might do some things differently today, but for the most part, I'm pretty happy with how all of them turned out. But,
well, I mean, to the untrained eye, some of them look like you just took a picture of the actual blocker. And the Arches Urbe one, the fact that you put so many puck marks on there just shows the attention to detail. Because anybody who loved watching Arches Urbe during that time, he started out with that clean white set, but he didn't take the Mr. Clean eraser to his stuff. It was like the blacker he could get it without taking a Sharpie to it, the better it seemed like.
Yeah, you had to do it, and I wanted it to have those details, those kind of things that somebody who had the know-how and the had grown up in those eras or seen those goalies would recognize and be like, oh yeah, he did it right. So that was those fine details were a challenge at times, but were a big part of it. Getting it right was important.
Yeah. So what's been the most frustrating blocker to create so far?
any blocker you can't get good reference picks for, I'll tell you. Some of the new digital stuff actually can be tricky because they can build in those really fine details. Those are and watermarks and things like that. Until you get the right pick, it's almost impossible. Like that. The new Bauer had the Bauer mock had like tiny little print. If anyone goes and takes a look at them, kind of underneath the angular shape on the blocker, you just couldn't read it in anything. But the problem with the blocker wallpaper is that the resolution is high enough that you have to be able to. So getting anything you can't get a good reference pick for. The Hervé was actually easier than I thought it would be to make it really messy. I thought it would be super hard, and that one kind of came together pretty easily. The dragon one, the Brian's one, I don't know how they stitched that. I mean, I knew I had to make it the second I saw it, but I'll tell you, I was glad when it was done.
Yeah, in fact, I'm looking at that one right now, and that one's pretty cool. When that set came out, everybody's just like, "All right, that's pretty darn cool
everywhere."
For Team China." And you go through it, and I don't know, probably 95% of these are NHL goalies, but along the way, you've decided to do some other goalies. You've got KVG, you got my buddy Bones, you got some of the Paralympians. What made you venture away from the NHL to some of these other still pretty cool blockers?
Yeah, I think, and PHF too, which was a super fun project. I think the representation part of it. All those people are playing hockey. They've committed their time, their energy, and their talents to it. And I looked at that and said, well, you know what, we can represent that too. And so it's been cool to connect with some of those different communities, and I find myself now way more aware of the different tournaments and the different things that are going on as well. It's just more hockey to watch, and I can't think of a negative to do with that. So
well, I have to say, up until recently, the Tonyesposito waffle blocker was my lock screen up until I got a different one. So there's that to be said. But no, I do like that, you point out that the representation. You've got the PHF, you've got some of the female Olympians, you got some of the sled hockey Paralympians. In fact, one of my recent guests, Jen Lee, I think he had his on there.
Honestly, they've also got some of the cooler equipment. Like there's brands and there's gear that just isn't going to be in the show, and so it's actually like more fun and different kinds of color schemes and stuff. Like for me, there's also a creative aspect of like, it's just more interesting gear.
Yeah, there's that too. In fact, whose was it? He did the Chaos Hockey one, where it's the rainbow stuff, which was pretty darn cool. But some of us beer leaguers, we got nothing better to do, so we create cool equipment because we finally have the funds to do it. So we do. With each of those blocker posts, you have pretty cool hockey cards that you do with them, and some of these cards exist, so that's easy, but others don't, and you're creating them yourself. You're using the old retro backgrounds. Did you just find the files somewhere and work with them, or did you have to recreate those too?
No, those are all reverse engineered. Oh man, like I don't. Already, I'm like, does he do anything else? Yes, I have like all kinds of other things going on. I swear, I'm not just sitting in front of.
Yeah.
But I mean, once you get the handle on it and you got a sense of how they approach some of those designs, I wanted to have some kind of. Again, it goes back to like planning kind of the release of them, because I thought they were cool, and I was like, I want just other people to have them. I don't like. It's not about like followers or anything like that. It's just like, I know I've met too many people who want it on their phone to not want to get some reach with it. And, and so I wanted it to be like clear what it was, which is why I had the phone graphic there. But I also wanted, because this is like pretty niche, right? Like we're not just in hockey, we're also in like the goalie world of hockey, which is like pretty niche. And so I wanted, just for like anyone who stumbled across it to be able to like understand what was going on. So I wanted the visualization of the actual blocker there. And I was like, how can I do that? Well, we're a hockey card account, albeit a strange one. So I was like, we need a representation there. But initially, I was able to find original cards that represented the blockers. And there were a few blockers that I'd made that I had to go back and make slight adjustments to so that they matched the one on the card. You don't realize, or maybe probably some people do, you don't realize just how customized everyone's gear is until you're like, I'll make one Vaughn Legacy blocker. And then you go to make the second one and it's just completely different. And you're like, I'll start all over again. So there was that aspect of it where I wanted that representation of the game, of the blocker there, so people knew what they were looking at if they weren't familiar with it. Well, and I had a bunch of those cards kind of made. I'd use them for a couple random projects here or there, and so I was like, well, I went as long as I could with just using the original cards, but as soon as you want to make current blockers that are being used in whatever season it happens to be, you have to start making the cards yourself because they don't exist. So so was that, and I was fortunate. Like I would say, like the head swap history and some of the accounts that I was able to connect with in those early days when it was just the head swaps. I was able to shoulder tap some people. I think it was Random Hockey Collections was somebody who sent me just dozens of cards that matched the blockers and would go through his stacks to find them. So I appreciate everyone who chipped in on those to find those original cards back in the day, because that was.
And like I dabble somewhat in graphic design and have some fun. Like when my son was playing baseball and he was younger, I would take some good pictures at a game or two, and then I would create baseball cards for him. But I didn't get crazy. I went with the old like 1980s, 1970s backdrops because they were easier to recreate. But you're doing some of the cool, more detailed ones. So props to you, because it's not easy. And if I didn't know better, I would say, you got the template from Tops or from Upper Deck or whatnot. They're spot on.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it wasn't by accident. Lots of looking very closely at the cards and trying to get it right, and sometimes spending. There were a few times where it's like, that's good enough, and then you're like, no, it isn't, and you go back and you touch it up. But then people show up, they look at it, blows their mind, and the time is well worth it.
Yeah, it's fun, and other people find it cool, so it makes it worth the while.
I hope so.
I get that. What's been your favorite card template to come up with?
Good question. There's a few I like going back to. I like some of those vintage ones because they're so recognizable, and so people, I think, kind of connect with them, relate to them, and there's a nostalgic aspect there too that I think, especially with like collecting blowing up during the pandemic and whatnot. I really like some of those old Tops ones. Although there's a special place in my heart for the 89-90 Pro set, or it might be the 90-91 Pro set.
I was going to say that's a great set. That's what time I started too.
Is that's the one I'm thinking about? It's got like the blocks on the top and the bottom of the card.
Yes.
And then like the nameplate's kind of curved. That was the first I got. That was the first set I ever had complete. The first complete set I ever had. I got it for Christmas from my grandparents, and it was the first set I ever had, and the one that and the pictures on it are, some of them are good and some of them are, it's an interesting set, not the most prestigious set. And but yeah, just hours spent leafing through. It's a large set as well. So that one has a special place in my heart, and I do like working with that one. I try not to overuse the ones that I enjoy.
One of my favorite things of that set is they even had cards for the officials.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really cool. That's a set I really like from my early days of card collecting, and the old score sets. For whatever reason, me and my dad collected both the English and the French version of those early score sets, and they weren't necessarily maybe the best looking ones compared to other ones on the market at the time, but I don't know, I like the design with them. And you had said something earlier about how soccer or from afar they look like they're the same, but they're not. I mean, my two different Vaughn Legacies, I got the one I bought in 1999, and then I got my new one, and the placement of the Vaughn lettering is the same, but it doesn't go all the way up the blocker like on my old one like it does now because of stitching. And I remember when Ev from Vaughn sent me a message. He's like, hey, just so you know, the letterings could be a little bit different. I was like, I don't care what you have to do. I just want the equipment, but it's like, those are things you don't even think of until you start looking real closely.
Yeah. Different materials, different kind. And every time there's a new material, you got to have a new texture for it that's going to kind of match and look right. That early Balfour, getting the iridescence on the green there was a bit of a tricky business. And it's interesting to go back and look at some of that customization that was going on at the time, and then you got to pick, which of the 5 seasons they wore that gear during that you're gonna cover, right?
Right. One of the cards that you did that I was just like, come on now, was the Buffalo Butte CCM blocker, where you have the old Upper Deck Collector's Choice card, where those were back in the day paintings, and you made it look that way. It's like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember working on that one, and there's always a point with like because it was a bit of a different approach I had to take with that one. There's always a moment in it where you're like, I don't know if this is going to work, and then it like kind of came together, and I just sat back and I was like, oh, this is very good. Like it was the first time I was like, I didn't know how I did it. It just kind of it happened, and actually that one, everyone's favorite e-bug, one of their favorite e-bugs, Kyle Connon, I think I'm pronouncing it right. The black Tampa alternate blocker, he didn't have a picture of himself in that gear, so I had to kind of manufacture an image for it. And so the collector's choice one actually lets you, first of all, the goalie is smaller, and you get to like kind of blur it out. I'm giving away all my secrets, but you get to kind of blur it out. And so it's actually like a shortcut because I didn't have good images. So I had to like find a way to represent it without with the resources that I had available. So it was kind of out of necessity. But they both, those are 2 cards that I'm pretty proud of.
I like how you mentioned, you start putting time into it and you're like, is this going to be worth it? And then you sit back and you're like, yeah, it was. I think my son was in 3rd grade playing baseball, and I wanted to make a Diamond Kings card for him. So I found the picture I wanted to use, brought it into Illustrator, and started doing that cool Diamond Kings illustration look to it, and spent way more time than I should have on it. But then I was done. I was like, ooh, that's cool. And even he was like, that's cool, Dad. Can we print them? I was like, no, we are not going to the printer and printing like 300 baseball cards. But I have it digitally if you want it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, even if we just think it's cool, that's all that matters, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was something, it's easy to get caught up in like, the likes and the follows, and you realize, oh no, you gotta be like producing that stuff, making it, and putting the time in because you want to see the final product. And if you like what you see, then then you can be satisfied with it. You don't have to worry about the rest of it. So that was an important thing I figured out pretty early on. It's like, I'm just going to make this for me. Every once in a while, you get a message from someone who's like, can you make my blocker? And sometimes you can, and you send it to them. And yeah it's been good vibes.
I like that you say that about the account, because it's like it's more of your hobby. It's something you're doing for you, but you like the likes. So it makes you feel good. It gives you that affirmation that other people like what you're doing. That's kind of how I started with Wash Up Goalie. It was just like, why not? I put it out there, and then all of a sudden people start liking it. And I think it was about a year or two in that my wife discovered it. She's like, why didn't you tell me you were doing this? Like, first of all, you're like, she's like, first of all, you're a weirdo. I was like, yeah, I know, you married a goalie. She's like, but that's pretty impressive that you've organically grown this little, following. It's like, yep. Yeah.
No, it's pretty cool, especially when people who know the equipment so well are like, well, that's pretty good. I remember it was pretty early on. It was the St. Louis Grant Fuhr blocker. And the I don't know who runs it, but the John Brown Twitter account was like, "Is this a picture? How did you find this?" And I was like, "No big deal." So it is cool, and it is it's neat to when the players themselves. It doesn't happen all the time, but when they see it and they're like, "This is perfect," or they're excited about it, it's pretty neat. And you kind of hit the nail on the head with it.
Yeah. So you've done a lot of different blockers now. What is your favorite blocker?
That's a good question. They're all my choice. No, I won't say anything that cliche.
Sophie's choice, I know.
That's a tough one. Probably the one that I'm trying to think which one. My phone switches up pretty regularly because I'm always kind of like testing it, seeing how it looks. There have been a few where I thought I nailed it, and then I put it on my phone and had it there for a couple of days, and it's like, it's not quite right. Something's got to change, and you just kind of shelve it for a little while. Sometimes it's just the last one you made, and you're like, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. But that's not a very good answer. So what is a good answer? I like the simple ones are nice. If the binding is an accent color, that looks really good. Like the Tebow blocker that he wore in his rookie season, that's like his junior colors. And it has like the white outline. It just looked really good on my phone. I just left it there for longer than I usually do. And that one stuck around for a little while. Also, I think the Vaughn vintage ones, I think Carly Jackson's was the first one I made. That one stayed on my phone for a long time too. And she likes the head swaps as well. So friend of the channel.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm just looking through so many of them. It's like, if I wasn't a person of habit, like I'll go with the same backdrop on my phone for years. I had this Murray Bannerman mask one for years up until I changed it to the Tonyesposito blocker. But if I were to change it out regularly, I'd just be putting different blockers on there. That's for sure. Yeah. We've been talking a while, so I want to be mindful of time. I ask every guest the same list of questions to close out an episode. I say close out an episode, but it usually takes 20 to 30 minutes to get through them because of the stories that come out of it. But they're the same questions I've asked every goalie of every skill level I've had, which is, I think, what makes it cool. And the first one is, and you might not have an answer to this because most of your playing was schoolyard. What's the craziest coaching moment from your playing days?
Yeah. Like you're absolutely right. I don't think have I ever played on a team with a coach in hockey? No. Even that early roller hockey team, it was a league. There were scheduled games. It was like we were kind of self-policed. and somebody's mom was over there or whoever drove us. But I don't think if you'd said, "Are you the coach?" they would have shaken their head and been like, "I'm not a part of this." So I don't know that I had that experience. I mean, I played soccer and basketball as well, and mostly just like coaches like shaking their heads at us because we weren't very good listeners. So I don't know that I have a great coaching story, unfortunately.
That's all right. No Bobby Knight stories.
No chair throwing that I can recall, but I may have blocked it out. So yeah, who's to say?
That was one of my favorite episodes of Parks and Rec when the government was on shut down, but they still had to provide a basketball league because it was Indiana. And Ron Swanson comes out there dressed like Bobby Knight for like a third grade basketball league, throwing chairs. He's like, "Yep, that's well done."
Sure.
So your pages focus on blockers, but the question is, what's your favorite all-time goalie mask?
Yeah, probably. It sounds kind of cliche, but it's just like the generation I was from, and so I would have to say like that early Potvin with the Leafs. Yep. I wasn't a Leafs fan, but Potvin was everyone's favorite goalie at school, and it's so iconic. Like you see it and you know whose it is, and nobody really did it the same or as well. Like you look at like the Cujo mask, but Hextall had one like that. So did Andy Moog. The Potvin one is kind of special. It's iconic. If you see it, you know it's Potvin. Mm-hmm. It couldn't be anybody else. And I would say the original like Toronto one, not like the Kings or the Boston rendition.
To me, Potvin and Belfour were the two that kept their image just throughout. Because even Cujo, he started out with that, what I think is his best mask, the trumpet one in St. Louis.
Yeah, iconic.
And some of the other ones, they had a look at some point. Mike Richter, he's probably the only other one. Same helmet. I mean, slight modifications, but same throughout. Yeah. Those three, Brodeur, but yeah, they kept the same. And I heard on the latest In Goal podcast that Vasilevsky's trying to keep his pretty much the same year to year for that same reason. It's like he wants that iconic look. And I like that.
Yeah, I like the idea, like you of having a theme and kind of playing with it and seeing those subtle variations through and through. When masks first went super detailed, so much of it was tied to team imagery and stuff. So as soon as people start moving around, you can't really carry it over, or if you do, it gets kind of weird. So, all that to say, I agree.
So the next questions could be an interesting one because most of your playing days were, on the roads and the ponds. Where's your favorite rink or area you've played?
Well, I mean, some of that Cookies roller rink, I mean, that's just like, it was so terrible that it's like kind of amazing. And, we just wanted a concrete surface to like, it was, typically people were just there with roller skates doing figure eights, or I don't know what they were doing. But that one was just kind of like, for as absurd as it sort of felt at the time, is probably pretty special. Any barn you win in is a good one. There was a little while where my spring ball hockey team, we played pretty well in Pilot Butte, and you're just like, is it the coolest rink in the world? No, but we get W's, so it's my favorite.
Yeah, and for me, it's either that building you just have great success in, and like I really don't like the Augsburg Ice Arena. That's the rink where they tied Goldberg to the net in the movie The Mighty Ducks. The rink kind of sucks. Like they only have 2 locker rooms, so when you get ready, you got to bring your bag out of the locker room so that the team coming on the ice after you can get ready. It's like, what kind of setup is this? But when I was in college, I had good games at that rink. So I was like, yeah, I kind of like that one.
For sure.
Now that I'm older, I don't like going to play there for the reason I stated. But when I was in college, it was like, no, we had the locker room before and after the game. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
But it was like, yeah, I like that rink. But in high school, there's that one rink that I grew up playing in. And I can close my eyes. I can still smell the different each locker room had its own smell. And then the lobby, it's probably the same with that roller rink. You can close your eyes and you can smell the rink.
I mean, I do think that like ice rinks have they have a distinct aroma that cookies didn't have. But
yeah.
there are visceral elements of it I can remember that definitely like stick with you over the years.
Now I have to ask, did the rink have like the carpeted boards that most roller rinks had, or was it more hockey style boards?
No. It was a room. it was a room, and I'm trying to remember if it even had rounded corners. It was people making the best of a bad situation. One side was completely open because there's all like the seating where people, they'd roll over and sit down and then whatever. And so they just I want to say they were just like those like gymnasium benches on that side that just kind of put down. And on the other side, like I'm pretty confident there was a radiator that the ball would, it was right along the ground, like you'd bank it off the radiator to ice it. And if it got too low, it could get stuck underneath. But I could be misremembering, but that feels really true right now.
So was it like in baseball, the ground rule double? If the ball got stuck under, the arms just go up and the other team gets the ball? What were the rules there?
I think you just go dig it out. I think play on.
Yeah. The old Mystery Alaska, Sika goes into the corner and he comes out with it.
Oh, man, I haven't seen that in a very long time. I think I saw that in the cheap theaters when it came out.
So the next question is, what's your favorite goalie stick that you've used?
This one's pretty easy. My dad worked at the exhibition grounds here and as an electrician, and the exhibition grounds are where like the junior hockey team plays their games. And so they're all the old sticks or partially busted sticks that all end up in a bin, and every once in a while they find their way home. And I got a Coho Revolution, the black base with the blue outline on the white letter, from like I'm not 100% sure, but it was like the Mike Risdale or Chad Mercier era, and of the Regina Pats. And that came home, and it was like, I don't know why it was discarded. It was in pretty good shape, and then we just used that stick until it was we wore it down to like a player stick. It was like, I think by the end it was like this thick at the heel. But
I got a few former goalie partners who loved those Coho Revolution sticks. I used a few in college, but I understood the allure of them, and one of them was the fact that they could play the puck better with them. I was never good at playing the puck, so it didn't matter to me.
Fair enough.
But yeah, you talk about playing road hockey, and those blades, they start out like this and they get thinner and thinner. And it was funny when the forward sticks would come out, and it was just like this little itty bitty paring knife almost. And it's
worn down to nothing.
But those guys could still figure out how to control the hockey ball and make it fly. That was the wonder of it. So what's your favorite youth hockey memory?
Some of the that roller hockey would have been up there. I think my fondest memories are like we had a large back patio in the backyard, and you'd set up the net, and on the way home, like you and your friend on the bus, hey, let's hop out and shoot until you have to go home for supper. And you kind of like develop, like there's just the two of us some days, so you got to like figure out how do you play a game with two people. So like what's a clearing line? Goalie can clear it. Like you just come up with these absurd rules so you can play a game. And those are some of my faves probably. just like after supper, just playing until until your parents are like tired of the racket.
Yeah,
I mean, you were there because you wanted to be, not because anyone was like, you got a game tonight or whatever. You just were playing because that's what you wanted to be doing.
We were lucky when I was a kid. We had a street light right out in front of our house, so we could play until mom and dad called us in.
Yeah.
And it was like playing wiffle ball when it was just two of you. You came up with the absurd rules, just so you could play.
Yeah.
You figured out ways to do it.
Because just taking shots, I mean, no, you gotta add that element. You gotta add the wins and losses and escalate it just a little bit.
Well,
get some emotion going.
Back to what you said earlier, you got to have some form of competition involved. Yeah. And yeah, it was usually me in net with my Milek Garth Elgar goalie mask and the Milek pads and my old Winwell 1970s glove and blocker that I got from Play It Again Sports. But in my neighbor Mike Hurley just out there shooting. I was always goalie, he was always shooting, but you know what? We figured out a way to make it competitive and fun, and that's all that mattered.
For sure.
So what's the best chirp you've heard playing the game?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't get a lot of chirps. These days, it's like if we play a young team, they're like, "Go home to your family." All right, because I can drive myself. Yeah, that sounds good. So I mean,
loves me, kid.
Those ones make me laugh because I'm just like, okay, I'm not all that upset about the age I am right now, so this is fine. I don't know if there's a ton. There was some the roller hockey league I played in just out of high school. There was no ref. There was just like an angry lady who ran the league, and so like it was all self-policed until something would go awry, and she'd come down and break it all up and tell everybody what the situation was. And those were pretty entertaining times as well. She was a force, to be sure.
I like that. No ref, just an angry lady. We all know, we can picture what she looks like. That's great.
Yeah, she but I mean, everybody listened. She had full control of it, so
yeah, nobody was going to go against her. So what is the worst post-game beer you've had?
You know, I would venture to say that any beer post-game is pretty good. You're just rehydrating, obviously. So I mean, right after the game, I can be a bit of a snob the rest of the year, but right after a game, everything's on the table, and it all tastes pretty good. And you know, you don't always get to choose where you go after the game or whatever, so you just make the best of it. And I won't complain after a game. Now the rest of the week, I have some opinions, but
same.
But on game day, nah, it's all good.
I've said it before, you know, those light domestic beers are almost the best after a game because you're rehydrating and they're darn near water anyway. So you get those in the locker room. And then when you get out to the parking lot or, you know, wherever the team decides to go afterwards, that, like you said, then it's a different story. And where I skate the super rink, there's a brewery across the street. And if we have a early game, we'll tend to go over there after the game and grab a bite to eat. And, you know, all my teammates are getting something light or fruity, and I'm like, what kind of porter do you have on tap? And they're like, what are you doing with that? I'm like, I enjoy the taste, guys. I'm not drinking for consumption and
a connoisseur.
Here. Yeah, I'm drinking it because I want one good one, not 4 quick ones.
Yeah.
Like, okay, whatever. I'm like, well, it's also cheaper doing it that way, guys.
That's true. I tend to lean towards the hops, and we're pretty lucky. We've got quite a few good kind of local brewers here, so we do all right.
Yeah, and you know, hoppy beers, I'm not against them. It's just like any beer. There's the right time for it. You know, this time of year, the hoppy beers are better. We're moving into porter season, and pretty soon it'll be stout season.
Indeed.
So yeah, So when you tape your stick, do you go toe to heel or heel to toe?
Heel to toe. I don't
Okay.
I don't know how everyone. I hear this controversy like it's somehow a controversy. To me, that's the way to do it. And if you ever stick on the ice, you're not pulling up your. I mean, I don't know. That's the way I do it. Although I'll say, in my ball hockey leagues and in the roller hockey leagues, we didn't tape, or at least
Okay.
I didn't ever tape, whether I was playing in net or out.
Okay. Now, did you not tape because you were using the plastic blades, or were you still using the wood blades?
No, I mean, first couple of years, that's okay. So I had a player stick. It was a CCM Vector, and this would have been early to mid 2000s, and it had like a plastic insert in the heel, so it didn't split like the wooden sticks did, but it was cheaper than the composite sticks, which were just sort of like had just been invented, and I used those almost exclusively. But depending on what you were playing with, like whether it was the kind of rubbery plastic pucks or the ball, the tape didn't always play well with them, and you'd end up leaving it behind, or it would stick instead of letting you stick handle. So especially playing out, I wouldn't tape, and I found it just had more control and a better shot.
I had a buddy that used electrical tape on his road hockey sticks for the reason you mentioned. You know, like traditional hockey tape, the ball just didn't go well with it, but the electrical tape was close to, you know, the feel of that bare blade, but it still protected it a little bit. Do you remember late 90s? There were a few of the manufacturers made specific street hockey sticks where it was like a wood stick, but like that Vector you were talking about, it was like a plastic, bottom of the blade.
Coho had one or something like that.
Yeah, Coho, Franklin had some. And Franklin, I know what people think of their hockey equipment, but they were a pretty good road hockey equipment manufacturer, especially for sticks. They understood it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the wood sticks so quick to split, and so yeah, definitely. Like those vectors changed the game for me when I was playing out. Before that, in the streets, it was you're either like absolutely destroying the stick or just wearing out those like screw-on plastic blades that didn't hold a curve. They've got some like I've played in a few floor hockey leagues, and you can get some pretty stiff plastic ones that you kind of have to heat to curve, and they can be pretty decent. But it's interesting technology.
I remember being a kid. We had a slop sink in the basement, and the hot water in that was almost boiling. So I remember sitting down there just soaking that thing in water and getting that Stan Mikita curve and, you know, putting it like this at night. So in the morning when you came out, it was like a Paul Coffey curve.
Yeah.
Because it, like you said, it wouldn't hold it. But if you overdid it the night before, it was usually decent for playing the next day. So when you play, what's your favorite number to wear and why?
Well, so like, because I do kind of play, or I did play in and out. Mostly I play out these days just because we want to win games. But in net, if I would lean towards 26. It was a number like I had a few basketball jerseys playing back as a child, or like in elementary school and high school. Although I had some 7 shows up from time to time. And then there was also like my wife and I had just like all these strange, like coincidental 26 number things. So that seemed like a thing to stick with. And then when I'm out, it's 91 because Fedorov was the best. He was just the best, at least at the time. And so he was my favorite player. So that was the number for there.
Please tell me if you're skating out and you're wearing number 91, you have the Nike Air Zoom.
Okay. No. And I think I saw that on your feed and I was jealous.
Yes, I still have.
And yours are the white, the base white with just the black accent at the back, right?
Yes.
Like the boot is white.
Yeah.
Because Gretzky wore the black one with the white heel.
Yeah, mine looked like what Fedorov had, where it was mostly.
Yeah,
But what
those are the ones I think
they
of when
they
I think of them.
yeah, and what I loved about the rollerblade is they actually followed the design onto the metal chassis, so that the curves followed it, and there's little white graphics on the aluminum chassis. And I remember I saved up for those things. They were probably $180 back in 1996, which was a lot of money for a high school kid at that time. I remember my dad paid half of them for my birthday, and he's like, "You're going to spend this much money on a pair of rollerblades?" But I wore those things everywhere. I
They're,
Mom would
they're
drop me off
gorgeous.
at yeah, mom would drop me off at school in the morning, and I'd have to walk home. So I would bring my rollerblades to school. I'm walking down the hallways with my rollerblades. My teachers are always just shaking their head. They're like, "There goes Joe, the hockey," because high school hockey wasn't as big as it is now in Chicago. And it's like, "Yep, there's our hockey player walking down the hallway." And I would rollerblade home. I worked at a local ice rink. I would rollerblade, and it was funny because we had open skate on Friday nights. And it was pretty big, and you get a couple hundred people there. So there's always a local cop that would come and show up just to make sure there was no trouble. And so I got to know a lot of the cops in that area. And one day I'm skating to the rink on a Sunday for a Sunday afternoon open skate, and I would always skate the side streets because I'm not stupid. And all of a sudden I hear a siren behind me, and I look, and it's one of the cops, and he's telling me to step to the curb. I was like, what's going on? And he's laughing. He goes, "I just pulled out the radar gun. You were doing 30 and a 25. I should give you a ticket." I was like, ooh. So didn't realize I was that fast. I must have been going downhill. I don't know. But
No big
he was
deal.
just laughing. And so then he makes me late for work. And I come into work, and my manager's like, "Why are you late?" And I was like, "You're not going to believe me." And they're like, "Why were you late?" I was like, "You are not going to believe me if I tell you." And they're like, "Tell me why you were late." And it's like, "I got pulled over." She's like, "But you rollerbladed here." I go, "Yeah, I got pulled over." And she's like, "I don't believe you." And then that cop that wound up pulling me over came to the rink to, just check on the open skate. And he comes walking in. I pointed to him, and I looked at my manager. I was like, "Go ask him what he did earlier today." And she's like, "What?" I was like, "He's the one that pulled me over." And he's like, "Yeah, I did." And so that was kind of a not a
That's
joke, but
funny.
one of those stories at the rink during those years where it's like, yeah, only kid we know that got pulled over rollerblading.
I got a pair of hand-me-down Reebok pump skates that fit me
Okay.
for a year or two, and those are pretty sweet. Those are probably originally the most expensive skates that somebody paid for.
Yeah. I've told this story on the podcast before. My very first pair of goalie skates, we bought them at Play It Again Sports for, I think it was like $20. And I wore them for a year or two, and then bought a new pair um, at the local pro shop. Well, we sold the old ones thinking we're going to get $5-10. He gave us $5 more than we paid for them, and we waited until we were done with the transaction. Then we told Linus, and he starts laughing. He goes, "Well, it sounds like you made a good deal with me then." He's like, he's still looking at him and goes, "I'm still going to make money off these, so I don't care." He goes, makes for a good story. Um, so the last question: what advice do you have for young goalies?
Well, I probably don't have a lot of advice for that position that anyone should be taking, but I do think if you're making stuff, if you've got that creative streak, put it out there, and it's been pretty interesting this last year and a bit. Making connections, having people share your stuff, and finding out where it ends up, and every once in a while, people just send you just the nicest messages. So it's been kind of a weird roller coaster that's been just enjoyable and generally just positive. So yeah, and I'll just make it. I'll just put it out there, and it's good enough for me. So I'm happy, and if other people enjoy it, so much the better. But yeah, I don't know if that's advice, but
I think No, it is, and I think it's good advice, not just for art, but whatever these young athletes are excited about, you know, put it out there. We tell my daughter all the time, like, let your freak flag fly at school. Be your true self, because you're going to find the other people that are interested in the same stuff as you, and you'll never find them if you're not honest and true to yourself. Um, and you're going to find way more people that support you than, excuse me, don't. And they're going to be way more vocal. You're always going to have the haters. You're always going to have them. So just learn how to block them out. It's the same thing in sports. You're always going to have the hecklers. You're always going to have, those people that don't want you to succeed. So find a way to block them out and just gravitate and listen to the positive, and you're going to go far in life.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's sort of these two facets to the account. I know that some people, every time they see a head swap, are just waiting for a blocker, and sometimes people see the blockers, they're waiting for the head swap. And I'm just glad that I can just force them to look at the other thing. And every once in a while, you get some crossover, and it's pretty fun. So yeah, it's definitely been interesting, and I don't know. It was funny. My daughter will say like, "Oh, we'll run into somebody." She'll be like, "Tell them about that." I'm like, "They won't understand. This is kind of like, tell them about it. This is pretty rad." I'm like, "You, me, and a few other people will agree with you," and she's not wrong. But it is a pretty niche community. But the people who enjoy it seem to really dig it. So
Yeah,
wow.
it's funny you say it, because I've been doing the podcast for a while now, and most of my teammates didn't even know about it until we were at a skate last winter before the winter season started, and there was one of my teammates got some ice before the season started, just so we could have some pickup hockey, get the rust off the legs, and there was open skate before, so I brought my kids with. They skated around, and then they were going to watch us play pickup hockey, and my daughter's sitting there as we're getting, because this little rink didn't have locker rooms, so we're just getting ready in the lobby, and my daughter's sitting there reading a book, and one of my teammates is like, mentioned something, and my daughter's like, "Oh yeah, Dad had him on his podcast," and like half of them were like, "His podcast? What?" And I was like, "Yeah, I got this podcast talking to goalies," and they're like, "Anybody we would know?" I was like, I don't know, Kelly Rudy, Ed Belfour, and like all my teammates like,
Hockey
what?
card head swap, yeah. The
Like,
big name.
I've got to
Big name.
log in here, and one of my teammates goes, "Who's Eddie Belfour?" And at that, like, everybody turned their head. They're like, "Are you kidding me?" And like, I felt like the kid from The Sandlot when they're like, "Who's Babe Ruth?" And the catcher, he's like, "The Sultan of SWAT, the Big Bambino." Like that was me with Eddie Belfour. He's like, "I don't know." So like, I got home and I sent him like 5 YouTube videos of Belfour highlights, and he comes back afterwards. He goes, "Yeah, looks like he wasn't too bad." It's like, yeah. And he also sent me some of his whiskey. When I said that, then I had his attention. He's like, "Wait a minute. So he sent you whiskey and you haven't brought any for the team?" I was like, why would I? Listen to my
Yeah.
podcast. So I did bring it. I shared it with the team. It was funny. It was like once I mentioned the whiskey, then I had his full attention. Yeah. So, well, Dale, it's been fun chatting with you, getting to know you. And to your point early on is, I like to talk to goalies of all ages and skill levels, and because it doesn't matter what level we've played at. We've all stood in front of the puck or the ball, and it's the same. It's just maybe going a little bit faster or harder for some of us, but the ideas are the same, and that's what I think binds us together. And as I've talked to all of these different goalies, it doesn't matter the skill level, because once we start talking, we're all in it together. I used to say we're all brothers, so I've had more female goalies intentionally on it, and I love that, because as we've learned, representation matters. So I've been having more female goalies on, and it's the same thing. We all go through the same stuff. We all have the same anxieties are coming down on the breakaway, but we still have that same confidence at the same time, and it's just fun to sit down and talk and share those stories.
Yeah, the highs feel as high, the lows feel as low, and that's why you do it, right?
Yes, but I will say, as at least for me, as I've gotten older, the lows they're usually they're not there, and if they are, it's for maybe until I crack that first beer after a game. Which I shouldn't say first beer because it's almost only one beer after a game because I got to drive home. I'm a responsible parent.
I appreciate it.
Every once in a while it might be two, but that's my limit because I know I'm Irish. I know my limits.
Yeah, definitely. No, kind of to your, and I remember you talking about this on one of the episodes I was listening to. Realizing how your performance in the big picture of the game played out, and being able to be satisfied with that. I played on a lot of teams that did
Hmm.
not that got shelled a lot of games,
Yeah.
and you find I'm not a person who's going to flip out on the ice or anything. I play a pretty real. I get back at people on the scoreboard and things like that. That's my mentality, at least. But you set goals for yourself, and you look for ways to hit those targets. And if you can leave the game feeling like you played your best game and you did what you wanted to do, the scoreboard's a part of it, but it's not the whole
Yep.
thing.
No, it's not. Like our season opening game, it was a rough one because the team we were playing was just better that night. And so instead of looking at the scoreboard, I was like, okay, what can I do this shift? What can I
Yeah.
do the next 2 minutes different? If I notice one thing, maybe the game's out of hand, so I'm at a point where we don't have practices, so maybe I focus on practicing on something at that point. It's like control what I can control, and remember, I got to wake up in the morning and go to work. Thank God
Exactly.
I don't have to commute these days because I do work from home, but I still got to wake up. I got to walk into the home office. I got to work in the morning. That's what I just remind myself about. And like I says, as I get older, it's easier and easier. It's like I got a wife, I got kids. That's what's important at the end of the day. And as soon as we remember that, and it's kind of funny because in the beer leagues, you can kind of notice the guys that don't have kids. They're going a little bit harder. They're getting a little bit angrier in games. And those of us that have the families at home, we're kind of like, we're okay. Go on. You
Yeah.
you go into the corner hard. We'll let you.
Yeah, there's probably something there. Oh, I've met a few people who defy that rule, but
Oh yeah,
there's probably something to it, for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Well, Dale, it's been fun chatting with you. We're going to keep in touch for sure. And thank you again.
Yeah, no pleasure. Thanks for